Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fun one for you today.
We really do. I mean,
Mhm.
it is quite the journey.
Yeah, we are heading straight to the planet Eternia. Well, actually, by way of Oklahoma, to talk about the 2026 live-action film He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Right. Directed by Travis Knight, which is such a wild ride of a movie.
It really is. And to unpack it all, we've got a really fascinating source stack today. We're looking at some hard box office data, behind-the-scenes production notes, and some incredibly passionate film critiques.
Yeah, we actually translated some of these reviews from Spanish publications, right? Like
Yeah.
Cinemix and Rolling Stone
And
and Espanol.
Exactly. And the mission for you today, for the listener, is to explore how this film took an absurd, 1980s Mattel toy line, fully embraced the campy ridiculousness of it all, and somehow turned it into this incredibly fun fantasy adventure.
It's an adventure that critics actually really liked, but that totally stumbled at the box office.
Totally stumbled. But we're going to tell you why it's still completely worth your time. So let's dive in.
To really get a handle on what makes this movie tick,
Yeah.
I think you have to look at the very first major creative choice Travis Knight makes.
Right.
He has to introduce this character, Prince Adam, to a modern audience.
Yeah.
An audience that, honestly, might not know a single thing about 1980s action figures.
Which is most people at this point, yeah.
Exactly. And the way he does it just sets the tone for the entire film.
That introduction is where the movie throws you a massive curveball, because if you don't know the lore, Prince Adam is He-Man.
Right.
But in this 2026 version, he's played by Nicholas Galitzine, and Adam is actually separated from his magical sword of power when he's just a little kid.
Yeah, he's sent through a portal to Earth, basically to hide him from the main villain, Skeletor.
Which, that's a pretty standard fantasy trope, right? The hidden heir.
Totally. The classic hidden prince.
Sure, but it's the execution here that is just wild. Because they don't put him on Earth in some, majestic hidden sanctuary.
No, not at all.
He grows up under the name Adam Glenn, and he works in human resources in Oklahoma City.
I still can't get over that. Human resources.
Right. He lives in a regular apartment with a roommate named Hussein. He is just this completely average, mundane guy navigating corporate emails and, paying rent.
It's so grounded.
Yeah, and it isn't until he gets an anonymous text 15 years later that leads him to a local comic book store that he actually finds the Sword of Power.
And then chaos ensues.
Oh, completely. He gets arrested for stealing it, he gets attacked on a freeway by a giant ape monster named Beastman, and then he's finally rescued by the warrior Tila, played by Camila Mendes.
Right, who just whisks him right back to the ruins of his home planet, Eternia.
It is a massive tonal shift. Going from corporate Oklahoma to an alien warrior planet.
It gives you whiplash, honestly.
Yes. Honestly, I have to challenge this whole premise a little bit. When I first read that setup in the production notes, my immediate reaction was, oh no, they ruined it.
Really? You thought they ruined it?
Well, yeah. Doesn't trapping a grand fantasy hero in a mundane Earth setting risk making the whole movie feel incredibly cheap?
I see where you're coming from.
Because we saw this exact same thing happen in the 1987 Masters of the Universe film. The one with Dolph Lundgren.
Oh, right. The one that got heavily criticized.
Yeah, because in that movie, they clearly just didn't have the budget to show the alien planet, so they dumped He-Man in a suburban American town to save money. Doesn't doing that again in 2026 just kill the fantasy vibe completely?
That is a completely logical fear, especially given the history of the franchise. But if you dig into how the critics analyze this, especially that Cinemix review we looked at, they argue this setup is precisely the mechanism that saves the character.
Really? How does working in HR save a fantasy demigod?
Think about the core problem of adapting He-Man. Interpreting this character is a huge trap.
How so?
Because the immediate cultural association is just, the impossible 1980s bodybuilder physique, right? And invincible strength.
True, he's basically a walking action figure.
Exactly. If you start the movie with a flawless, invincible God King who has no weaknesses, the audience has absolutely zero emotional entry point. There's no tension.
Oh, I see. You're just watching an unstoppable guy punch things.
Right. But by starting Adam as an ordinary, vulnerable guy in Oklahoma who gets stressed out about his roommate and his office job, the audience forms a bond with his humanity first. before he's thrown into all the heroic magical paraphernalia.
Ah, so it's an empathy engine. You have to care about the guy underneath the muscle first.
Precisely. The Cinemix reviewer actually noted that Galatzine plays Adam with more charm than biceps.
That's a great line.
Isn't it? By the time he's holding up that sword and screaming, "I have the power," the transformation actually means something. He's not just putting on a Halloween costume.
Right. He's an ordinary person choosing to accept this terrifying, massive destiny.
Exactly. He has a certain naivety. He knows how to laugh at the sheer absurdity of his situation without turning the movie into, like, a sitcom.
And because Adam's character is so grounded and relatable early on, it gives the director, Travis Knight, a massive structural advantage later.
Right, because he doesn't have to spend the rest of the movie grounding the actual world of Eternia.
Yes. Because the hero feels real, the world around him is allowed to be completely insane.
And oh man, he leans into that insanity hard. Knight deliberately rejects the prevailing visual and tonal trends in modern Hollywood.
This is where that Rolling Stone on Espanol piece really caught my attention, because they went deep into how, for like the last 15 years, the default setting for geek culture properties has been to make them dark, solemn, and heavily desaturated.
Yeah, that gritty reboot phase.
Exactly. They reference the Zack Snyder era of superhero films where everything feels like this tragic, rain-soaked, religious epic.
Or even Kevin Smith's recent animated version of He-Man for Netflix, which is a very heavy existential drama.
Right. And the critics are careful to point out that dark and gritty approaches aren't inherently bad.
No, they can work great for some things.
But they argue that Hollywood developed this complex feeling like they had to apologize for the source material, like they felt embarrassed by the toys.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
And Travis Knight realized that treating Masters of the Universe with dead serious, brooding reverence is a fundamental misunderstanding of the assignment.
Because you cannot put a guy in a furry loincloth, hand him a giant magical sword, and pretend you're directing a Shakespearean tragedy.
You just can't. It's like taking a box of brightly colored neon plastic toys, dumping them onto a pristine mahogany boardroom table, and trying to convince the shareholders it's a documentary.
Huh. That is a perfect way to look at it. It just fundamentally clashes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a universe that features a giant green tiger named Battle Cat. It features a villain who literally has a floating skull for a face.
It's inherently ridiculous.
It is. It has bright neon colors, laser guns, and impossible gravity-defying architecture. If you try to hide all of that behind dark lighting and muted colors to seem mature, you are fighting the very DNA of the property.
Right. And Knight, whose background includes directing Bumblebee and the brilliant stop-motion film Kubo and the Two Strings, he just understands how to find the beating heart inside of a toy commercial.
Yeah, she treats the absurdity of the 1980s Mattel toys as the primary feature, not a bug to be fixed.
The Spanish critics actually compared its joyous, proudly artificial tone to the 2023 movie Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Oh, that is the perfect tonal touchstone.
Right. Both of these films respect their source material deeply, but they also possess the self-awareness to acknowledge that from the outside looking in, the whole concept is completely absurd.
Yeah, Knight just engineers this miraculous balance. The movie has a ton of humor, mostly driven by Adam's reactions to this crazy world, but it never crosses the line into degrading the material.
It never becomes a cheap parody.
Exactly. When it's time for the big epic mythological showdowns, the movie delivers them with absolute unapologetic sincerity.
Which means the actors delivering this mythology had to walk a total tightrope. Because to pull off a tone that is simultaneously sincere and completely absurd, you need a cast that perfectly understands the assignment.
You really do.
We touched on Nicholas Galatzine finding that humanity in Prince Adam, but we have to address the giant cackling skull in the room.
Oh boy, yes.
Jared Leto as Skeletor.
That was a casting announcement that definitely caused a stir.
To put it mildly. But according to the production notes, Leto actually hunted this role down. He approached the studio himself because he is a massive fan of the franchise and just wanted a chance to completely swing for the fences.
And the critics we reviewed absolutely loved what he did.
They did. They called his performance highly theatrical, extravagant, queer, and deliciously evil. But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
We all know Jared Leto has a tendency to go way over the top. I mean, his take on the Joker in Suicide Squad famously derailed a lot of scenes for people.
That's fair.
So doesn't his brand of extreme eccentricity threaten to break the movie or just distract the viewer here?
I'd argue that in almost any other film it might. But if you look at the mechanism of this specific movie's turn, Leto's eccentricity is actually the anchor that holds it all together.
Really? The anchor.
Yeah. The Cinemix critic wrote a brilliant line about this. They said, "This character does not need the subtlety of Scandinavian drama."
Huh. I love that quote. It really puts it in perspective.
It does. Because look at the psychology of modern movie villains. For the last decade, Hollywood has been obsessed with giving every single bad guy a 3-hour tragic backstory to morally justify their actions.
Right. We always have to understand exactly why the villain is doing what they do.
Exactly. But Skeletor completely bypasses that. This is a villain who literally practices his evil monologues in the mirror. He wants to conquer the universe simply for the sheer fun of being in charge and being evil.
He just loves his job.
He really does. Subtle, quiet acting wouldn't make sense for a guy with a skull face sitting on a bone throne. Leto brings this theatrical, mustache-twirling energy that acts as a tonal permission slip for the audience.
Oh, a permission slip. I like that.
Yeah, it basically tells you, hey, it's okay to just have fun with this.
And he's beautifully balanced out by the supporting cast who bring their own specific energies. Like, you have Idris Elba playing Duncan, the man-at-arms.
Which is such perfect casting.
Honestly, if anyone on Earth can wear bright, futuristic armor in a neon castle and make it look completely rational and grounded, it is Idris Elba.
Absolutely. He brings a necessary anchoring gravity to the film.
Yeah, he really does. And then you have Alison Brie, who shines as the manipulative evil Lynn, and Kristen Wiig voicing a literal robot named Roboto. It is an incredibly strange but effective ensemble.
It is. But what's crucial to understand about these performances is how the actors were able to deliver them. They weren't just standing in a gray, padded room staring at tennis balls on green sticks for 3 months.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is where my assumptions were completely shattered.
Same here.
When you tell me a movie features a character called Goatman, played by Afera Bjornsson, the guy who played the Mountain in Game of Thrones, and a cyborg with a metal jaw named Trapjaw, I immediately assumed this movie is 100% CGI.
Naturally.
I just assumed it was actors on a green screen generating a purely digital world.
Which is how 90% of blockbusters operate today.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to look at Travis Knight's creative DNA. He came up through Leica Studios doing stop-motion animation.
Right, like moving physical puppets frame by frame.
Exactly. When you are a stop-motion animator, you develop a deep, fundamental appreciation for tactile, physical world building. You understand how real light hits real fabric, how physical miniature sets cast real shadows.
It's a completely different mindset.
It is. And Knight took that philosophy of physical texture and scaled it up to a massive live-action blockbuster.
The production notes detail just how massive that scale was. They built actual practical sets.
It's crazy.
Yes, they filmed the Earth scenes in Canary Wharf in London, which makes sense for the HR corporate vibe. But for the Eternian castles, they didn't just render them in a computer. They went to Wells Cathedral in Somerset, England.
Right.
They actually boosted the local economy there by £6.6 million just by building these massive, larger-than-life physical sets inside and around the cathedral.
They also utilized the beer quarry caves in Devon for the underground sequences. They shot sweeping exterior landscapes in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. And they used the harsh volcanic terrain of Iceland to represent the darker parts of Eternia.
It's just wild to me. Taking a franchise that conceptually looks like an 80s heavy metal album cover and dropping it into real Italian mountains and ancient English cathedrals.
But look at the mechanism of why that works. CGI, even when it's great, often has a weightless quality to it. The light doesn't scatter naturally.
Right, it can look a bit floaty.
Exactly. But when you put colorful, exaggerated neon toy designs into real, physical spaces where the sun is actually hitting the actors, it provides a massive, grounded visual weight. It prevents the movie from feeling like a video game cutscene.
And the production designer, Guy Hendricks Dias, leaned heavily into that clash of medieval fantasy with science fiction.
He really did.
The critics noted that because of the practical locations, it literally feels like someone dumped a box of action figures onto a real table and spent a fortune to make them come to life, rather than just generating another generic, desaturated digital kingdom.
It's a huge part of why the movie works so well creatively.
So I'm looking at all of this, and it sounds like a triumph. We have an incredible physical production that grounds the visual effects. We have a director who perfectly threads the needle on a near-impossible tone.
Yep.
We have a cast that understands exactly what kind of movie they're making, and glowing reviews from both critics and fans. So I have to ask, how on earth did this movie lose $50 million?
That is the great paradox of this film. And it requires a deep dive into the sometimes baffling economics of the modern film industry. Because you're right, financially, it was a disaster.
The numbers from Box Office Mojo and the numbers are just brutal. The movie cost $170 million to make.
Which is a huge budget.
Right. But it only grossed about $114 million globally during its theatrical run. That breaks down to $65 million in the US and Canada and $49 million internationally. I know Hollywood accounting can be tricky, but that is undeniably a spectacular loss.
It is. To understand why that loss is so severe, you have to look at the math behind that $170 million budget. A movie doesn't just need to make its budget back to break even.
Right, there's marketing and stuff.
Exactly. Studios spend millions on global marketing, television spots, and press tours, and they also have to split the ticket sales with the movie theaters.
The theaters take their cut.
Exactly. So the general rule of thumb is that a blockbuster needs to make about 2 to 2.5 times its production budget just to break even. So a $170 million movie needs to make upwards of $400 million before the studio sees a single dime of profit.
And to hit $400 million, you need a movie that appeals to everyone.
Exactly. In the industry, they call it a four-quadrant movie. It needs to appeal to men, women, people over 25, and people under 25. You need every single demographic showing up to the theater to justify that price tag.
Right.
And He-Man, while famous to a certain generation, simply doesn't have the broad, universal four-quadrant appeal of a Spider-Man or a Batman.
But how did the budget get to $170 million in the first place? If they knew it was a niche 1980s property, why spend that much?
This is where a phenomenon called development hell comes in.
Development hell.
Yeah, this film didn't just get greenlit and shot in a year. It was stuck in various stages of development for nearly 2 decades. Different studios owned the rights. Directors came and went. Writers wrote dozens of scripts that were just tossed out.
Just burning through money.
Exactly. At one point, actor Noah Centineo was cast as He-Man and then dropped out. All those false starts cost money.
It's like trying to bake a cake, but you keep swapping out the chefs and the ingredients for 15 years. By the time you actually put the cake in the oven, you've spent a fortune on wasted flour and sugar.
That is a perfect analogy. The production notes actually reveal that Netflix spent $30 million just on developing a previous version of this exact movie.
$30 million?
Yeah. They spent $30 million on holding contracts for actors, concept art, and pre-visualization animations, and they never filmed a single frame before canceling it due to budget fears.
$30 million for literally nothing on screen.
Right. So by the time Amazon MGM Studios finally bought the rights and got this version over the finish line, the sunk costs and the overall budget were incredibly inflated.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, when a project takes 15 years to come out, it actively hurts the marketing momentum.
Oh, because people just hear about the problems.
Exactly. The public narrative in the media often becomes about the troubled production rather than the excitement for the movie itself.
Yeah.
General audiences read the headlines and subconsciously assume, well, if it took them 15 years to make it, it must be bad.
They feel fatigued before they've even seen a trailer.
Exactly.
Which is tragic because the people who actually ignored the headlines and bought a ticket absolutely loved it.
They really did.
The metrics for audience satisfaction are incredibly strong. It holds a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is remarkably solid for a campy franchise film of this type. It got a B Cinema score from opening night crowds. And on Post-Track, which literally polls audiences as they are walking out of the theater, 64% said they would definitely recommend it to a friend.
It is the textbook definition of a cult classic in the making.
And we are already seeing that second life happen. It hit Amazon Prime Video in July of 2026, and it's getting a massive 4K packaged media release this October. So it's finding its audience in the living room, even if it couldn't find them in the multiplex.
Which brings up a really important point for anyone listening to this right now. The studio's profit margins. The $30 million Netflix lost, the theatrical split. None of that actually dictates your viewing experience on a Friday night on your couch.
Absolutely not.
The massive box office failure doesn't magically erase the fact that this is a highly entertaining, incredibly well-crafted movie that is available to watch right now.
And I think that's the ultimate takeaway for me. We spent so much time unpacking the economics and the directing strategies, but at its core, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is a joyful, unpretentious movie that remembers a very simple, fundamental fact.
Which is?
Action figures are supposed to be fun.
Yes, exactly. Travis Knight didn't try to deconstruct the concept of the hero. He didn't make Prince Adam a tragic, brooding figure burdened by his power. He just let him be a hero.
If you're listening to this, think about the last few major blockbusters you've seen. So many of them are heavy, they're cynical, they are pushing past the 3-hour mark, and they demand that you take them incredibly seriously.
Yeah, they want to be important.
Right. And there is absolutely a place for those films, but there is also immense value in a movie that goes in the opposite direction. Sometimes you don't need a philosophical meditation on the nature of absolute power.
Sometimes you just don't.
Sometimes you just need to turn off the real world, grab a giant bowl of popcorn, and watch a guy riding a giant green tiger proudly shout, "I have the power," without a single shred of irony or apology.
It is cinematic escapism in its absolute purest form. It achieves exactly what it set out to do. But if we take a step back and connect this film's journey to the bigger picture of the entertainment industry, it leaves us with a pretty significant lingering dilemma.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, think about the mechanics of what happened here. Travis Knight and his incredibly talented team did exactly what they were supposed to do.
Right, they made a good movie.
They flawlessly captured the pure, unadulterated joy, the vibrant aesthetic, and the adventurous spirit of a beloved property. They pleased the critics, they satisfied the hardcore fans, and they crafted a movie that is genuinely, objectively fun to watch.
But the math still didn't work out. They lost the studio tens of millions of dollars.
Exactly. So here is the thought for you to mull over after this deep dive ends.
All right, lay it on us.
If a movie can be a total creative success, if it can perfectly deliver fun and joy with incredible practical sets and fully committed performances, but it still fails so spectacularly in the financial realities of modern Hollywood, does the current blockbuster model actually have room for movies that just want to be fun?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
Or are we, as audiences, doomed to only get ultra-serious, dark, brooding epics from now on simply because that's the only format the financial spreadsheet will tolerate?
Are we destined for a cinematic landscape where the neon plastic toys are permanently banned from the mahogany table?
That's the fear.
That is a slightly terrifying thought for the future of movies. But thankfully, we have this film to prove that, at least for one brief 140-minute window, Eternia was incredibly, wonderfully real. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.